Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Angie Grove. I'm the Executive Director here at the Ethan Allen Homestead Museum. Welcome to our free monthly lecture program. If you are not familiar, we have this lecture program 11 months out of the year, so all months other than December. It's always free to the public, and we have different guest speakers during that time, covering all topics from early American history, Vermont history, history of this site, and anything else to do with the homestead, including its nature, its garden programs, etc. So quite a variety of topics. Okay, so with that in mind, I would like to tell you of our next monthly lecture, which will be held on May 25th, which is also a Sunday. It happens to be Memorial Day weekend. And our historian who will be speaking is named Rob Grancham. He is a local here in Vermont. Who has spoken here before about Civil War history. He is a very engaging speaker, so you won't want to miss this one. But this one's not about Civil War history. His talk is titled The Anti-Masonic Period in Vermont, 1825 to 1860. And he has told me he is a Mason. I'm not sure if he's allowed to tell me that, but he has told me he is a Mason, so it should definitely be insightful. Okay. I also want to announce a few things going on here at the museum because it is almost spring. Well, I guess it's officially spring. April showers today, right? But it's our spring season here at the museum. We open up on May 1st. We're back open to the public. And then we're open daily May 1st through October 31st from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. We do guided tours of the historic Allen House, the Abenaki Village, and Fanny's Garden out in the grounds. And we also have a brand new exhibit that many of you walked right by when you were on your way in here. It is still in progress, but it will be ready for May 1st for you to come and view. And that is an exhibit commemorating the 250th anniversary of the Revolutionary War, which started a couple of weeks ago on the battles of Lexington and Concord, or earlier this month. And this year is the 250th anniversary. There are lots of 250th anniversary events going on here at the Homestead, including we'll have 2 Revolutionary War militia reenactment events, and those will be on May 24th and 25th, and June 21st and 22nd. But the very first commemoration event we're having will be in just a couple of weeks on May 10th. Does anyone know what anniversary that is? That's right. So we are calling that day here at the museum Green Mountain Boys Victory Day, the taking of Fort Ticonderoga, and we're offering free admission to all Vermont residents to come in and check out our new exhibit about the Revolutionary War. This new exhibit is called Voices of the Revolution, War on the Northern Frontier, and it is highlighting many untold stories of people who are associated with this site here during the time of the Revolutionary War, including a man who fought for both the American and the British at different points, a man who was imprisoned by the British for 3 years, a woman who had to flee her house while 9 months pregnant while it was being burned by raiders, and another woman whose fiance drowned in the Hudson River right before their wedding. So you're gonna wanna come and learn about these people, learn about their stories, and see really what diverse experience people had during the Revolutionary War. Okay, I have a few other things I need to cover. First up, I would like to thank the sponsors for our programs here, which include M&T Bank, North Country Federal Credit Union, AARP Vermont as well. So thank you to those sponsors who help us put on programs like this and the programs I also just mentioned. Speaking of sponsors, they help us out financially, but as you are all aware, there has been quite a drastic cut in funding for cultural historical programs and the arts. Which I should have mentioned, the new exhibit is an art exhibit that has partnered with local artists to create pieces to tell their stories. So, like many institutions, the Ethan Allen Homestead Museum is expecting a reduction in support to put on programs, exhibitions, research, educational school field trips, as well as preservation work that is drastically needed on the oldest house that is still standing in Burlington. I just want everyone to be aware of that you have the power of the citizenry to contact your representatives and to take action yourself. And to remind you that the Green Mountain Boys would remind you that rebellion is a patriotic act. Okay. So with that, I'm going to leave the stage and I'm going to introduce one of our board members, Glenn Fay.
So it turns out Kevin Graffagnino and I have a lot in common. We both graduated from the University of Vermont, class of 1976, which means we're both chronologically gifted, and members of the 20-year club at AARP. And we both became historians of early Vermont, that period before indoor plumbing and Pop-Tarts. But seriously, here's where Kevin gets a lot more interesting. Kevin began his prodigious Vermont history career back in high school when he collected and sold antique and rare books. And one of his career mentors, Nick Muller, said that Kevin could read 3,600 words per minute. Today, Kevin is the author, editor of more than 25 books, including this latest gem, which he will talk about, Vermontiana, which is absolutely a fantastic collector's item for you to own. So here's some highlights of his career. He wrote his PhD dissertation at the University of Massachusetts on Ira Allen, was the executive director of the Vermont Historical Society and the Kentucky Historical Society, curator of Vermont history at the UVM Library from 1978 to 1995, director of the Clements Library at the University of Michigan. He procured millions of dollars in donations for historical societies and libraries over his career. He won the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Center for Research on Vermont. Furthermore, on a regular basis, Kevin humbly attributes all of his success to his wife, Leslie. But this is only the surface of Kevin Graffagnino. Kevin has served as a reality checker for me in my research and my latent historian phase of life. He asked to read a draft of my emerging book on the family of Ethan Allen a couple of years ago. So I sent him off a copy. A few days later, it came back, which I didn't expect. And it was completely line edited from beginning to end. So Kevin is not only a scholar, but he's a heck of a nice guy and a gentleman as well. So you're about to hear from the world's foremost expert on one of the founders of this unique state of Vermont, someone whose knowledge is only exceeded by his spellbinding storytelling ability. Kevin is going to speak today about Ira Allen, who was once considered Vermont royalty. Well, if the Allens were Vermont royalty, then Kevin is Vermont historian royalty. Please welcome His Excellency, Kevin Graffagnino.
Thank you. As superpowers go, 3,600 words a minute is not particularly useful. Much rather have played basketball like Michael Jordan or something like that. All right, we have two commercials before our regularly scheduled program. One, how many of you are regular financial donors to the Ethan Allen Homestead? The rest of you should be. I'm a little more direct than Angie. Get out your checkbooks, get out your wallets, start donating to this place. It needs and deserves your support. Second, how many of you collect something, anything? Baseball cards, books. Okay, you're my prime audience. I need you to read this book. This is a guide to collecting old Vermont books, maps, pamphlets, etc. When I came into this field 53 years ago, there were lots of young people doing it. They're all gone. I need to go to Merrill's auctions and see young people, and I need to know that there are generations coming up that are going to collect Vermont history, because otherwise our history won't be saved. So there are 154 little chapters in here about books, pamphlets, Ethan Allen titles, etc., that you want to collect. You just didn't know it until now. Now you know. This can become your Bible as a Vermontiana collector, because collectors love lists. How many of X do you own? I have more, I'm better than you are. This will get you started. You can buy it at Phoenix Books, Burlington, Essex, Rutland. You can buy it from me. I will give you a lower price, but this is the book you want to pick up. All right. Ira Allen. I started a Vermont Life article on Ira Allen, 40 years ago, with the catchphrase, for most Vermonters, Ira Allen is a hard founding father to love. And what I meant by that is that we want to revere our founding fathers and mothers. We want them on pedestals. We want statues of them. We absolutely revere Ethan Allen in this state. We name everything we can after Ethan. Bowling alleys, laundromats, military units, parkways, etc., etc. And if you're ever doing your genealogy and you find there's an Allen in your family tree, you want it to be Ethan. Ethan is our Daniel Boone. He's our Davy Crockett. He's the rough, tough frontier hero who beat up all the Yorkers. We really like him. We like Thomas Chittenden. He's our first governor. He's the head of state. He steers the ship through the rocky waters to statehood. He's our George Washington. We name medical centers and counties and forests and lots of other things after him. Ira Allen, we're not so fond of. If Ira has a national counterpart, it's probably Aaron Burr, someone who also dreamed big, reached too high, fell from grace with history. And Ira is, in his own time and in our time, a shadowy figure. We don't look at him with the affection that we do for his big brother. My entire point today is that doesn't matter. I don't care whether you like him, but you've got to put him in the picture. If you're looking at early Vermont and you leave Ira Allen out because you're not fond of him, your picture of early Vermont is substantially incomplete. Ira is 19 years old when he gets up to this part of the world, what are known as the New Hampshire Grants. It's the summer of 1770. Ethan has just formed the Green Mountain Boys to keep New York out. All of the Allens are pure Yankee. All of Ira's brothers are already here. They are fighting for the legitimacy of New Hampshire granted property in this part of the world against the legitimacy of New York granted property. It's the Yankee versus Yorker battle that livens up the 1770s in Vermont. Ethan is out there leading the Green Mountain Boys, bopping Yorkers over the head, threatening to kill them. I mean, he's a guy. Ethan's 6'2", 225, which is Shaquille O'Neal size in the 18th century. He threatens you, you feel afraid. There's no question. Ira takes a much more solitary path in the 1770s. He comes up, he looks around, and he sees that nobody knows where their land is because land surveyors haven't been up here and done the detailed work that would tell you where your farm is, where the boundaries of the town you think you own. So he goes back to Connecticut, where the Allens tend to winter, snowbirds in the 18th century, and he studies with a master surveyor for 3 whole weeks. And then he declares, I too am a master surveyor. Now, I know some surveyors, and they tell me it's a moderately complicated type of work, particularly with 18th century instruments. And they say, 3 weeks master surveyor, that's like 1 semester at UVM med school and you're a brain surgeon. But this never stops Ira Allen. The rest of his life, master surveyor. I know everything about the profession. And he starts taking commissions from the Connecticut and Massachusetts owners of the New Hampshire townships up here. They need to be able to tell their buyers, where's your farm going to be? He comes up and he starts doing surveys, usually taking his fees in land rather than in money. And he becomes the most knowledgeable land investor / speculator on the grants because he knows where the mill sites are. He knows where the swamps are. He knows where the good, bad land is, and he is acquiring all the time with this knowledge. He becomes early in this process the man who is young man, 20, 21 years old, who is known. You got to keep your hand on your wallet when you deal with him because he is tricky. And he tells a story about himself. He writes it down decades later. He comes up in the summer of 1772. He surveys the town of Mansfield, Underhill and Stowe. Finds out his land is the top of the mountain, which in a pre-Ski-Tow day, pre-Volvo tourist day, is worthless. He goes back, tells the proprietors who hired him in Connecticut, says, I will sell any grants land I own except my Mansfield land. And they say, why is that? Because it is covered in gumwood trees. Now, they didn't know what a gumwood tree is. You don't know. I don't know because they don't exist. And they say, well, what's a gumwood tree, Mr. Allen? He says, well, it's a hardwood. It's much like the cherry tree, so very valuable for flooring, for furniture. This is all hooey, of course. There's no truth at all to this. You've been on the top of Mount Mansfield. I have. It's covered in rock, snow, ice, and some scrubby pines that can stand the climate. But by the time Ira is done with the story, the proprietors have bought his mountaintop at a substantial profit, and they have given him land for his survey down in what becomes Stowe Village. So he goes away whistling a happy tune. And even though Ira is the youngest and by far the smallest of the Allens, his big brothers call him Stub because he's about 5'5", 5'6", 130 pounds. If you want to be in a bar fight, you really want Ethan at your back. You don't want Ira in there punching for you. Even though he is Stub to his brothers, he's the one who comes up with the family plan for empire. He goes back to a meeting with the brothers in January of 1773, and he says, you boys have got it wrong. You have been buying your lands in the grants willy-nilly, wherever it comes up, but mostly what are today Bennington, Rutland, Windham, Windsor counties, the southern half of the state of Vermont. He said, I have seen the future. The future is the Onion Winooski River from Montpelier to Burlington, Colchester, north to Canada. That's the land that is going to be worth the most. We are going to buy there exclusively and build a family empire. And they believe him sufficiently that they found the Onion River Land Company, Allen Brothers and cousin remember Baker. And that becomes the dream for the family and for Ira in what he calls the country my soul delighted in. That's Ira's future from 1773 to the end of his life. By the time of the Revolution, the Onion River Land Company owns 100,000 acres in that L shape, the east banks, the east shore of the lake, and the Onion River, and the rivers flowing in. Because Ira is smart enough to know that in the 18th century, you power everything by water. There's no electricity, there's no coal. If you want to build a mill in every new village, every new town, needs a sawmill and a grist mill and a forge. You power those with water. He knows where all the mill sites are on the Lamoille, the Missisquoi, the Winooski, etc. So they are poised for greatness and fame and fortune when settlement begins. But then the revolution begins, 1775. Nobody, no Yankees can settle north of Rutland. Thomas Chittenden is in Williston. He goes back south down to Arlington for safety because the British are a powerful military force in Canada. They send raiding parties regularly south on Lake Champlain into the northern portions of Vermont. So that puts things on hold for the ORLC, if you like acronyms. It also gives the Yankees on the grants an opportunity they had not anticipated, because if the 13 colonies can form a new nation and break away from England, why can't the Yankees on the grants take that example and recreate it in miniature? And they do. They create, of course, first the state of New Connecticut in January of 1777, which becomes the state of Vermont that summer. Now, if you were looking for an Allen to lead or help lead that effort, you of course would have picked Ethan. But Ethan, great military strategist that he is, gets himself captured at Montreal in September of 1775 in a really bad idea, thinking that he can take the city from the British for General Montgomery. So he's gone. He's gone for 2.5 years in British prisons and in prison in New York City. Ira steps up. Heman Allen, second brother, dependable, smart, honest, would have been the logical second Allen. Heman dies after the Battle of Bennington. He gets sunstroke. He lasts a year, but is incapacitated and is dead. Ira steps up and fills the family void. He becomes secretary to first Governor Chittenden and the council, the little group of men, the oligarchy who run Vermont, forerunner to the state senate. The council is a small elected group, and they're in charge with Governor Chittenden. Governor Chittenden is not a terribly literate man. UVM has one of the very few letters in his own hand written near the end of his life. It's as if a fourth grader had written it. Thomas Chittenden was a wise, wonderful leader. He was not well educated. And so you write for him, you're writing for the state of Vermont. Ira becomes first state treasurer, which means the state's finances are in his saddlebags. There's no building, there's no staff, there are no auditors, there's nobody to do the work for you. Ira becomes the state's ambassador. Vermont has no military power. You want to win your battles, you have to persuade your enemies not to attack you. And Governor Chittenden and the council keep sending Ira to New Hampshire, to Massachusetts, to New York, to the Continental Congress, to speak for us. We win a lot more battles with the pen and with negotiating than we do with the sword in the American Revolution. And Ira is the point guy for this. Probably most importantly to Ira, he also becomes state surveyor general, because Benning Wentworth in New Hampshire, the colonial governor, granted about 2/3 of Vermont. Those are the townships. The remaining third is open land, and the state of Vermont does not want to impose taxes because it will make the state unpopular with the residents. And it's lovely to envision a time when there were no state taxes in Vermont. But you can sell the land. The remaining millions of acres can be carved into townships. You can sell it to speculators and settlers alike, and you raise funds for the government as a result. But the Surveyor General is in charge of all of this. So putting the biggest land speculator in Vermont in charge of land speculation in Vermont might today be considered something of a conflict of interest. Not to Ira Allen, and he regularly picks off some of the best land in those new townships. Now, I would liken this to putting billionaires with large contracts with the federal government in charge of budget reduction. And, oh, wait, we do that. Never mind. The most controversial aspect of Ira's work for Vermont, and he is tireless. He's in his early 20s. There's no television, there's no internet, there are no distractions. He does nothing but work for Vermont and the Allens. It's a team of two horses that are going side by side. The most controversial aspect by far of his work is what are known as the Haldeman negotiations. In 1780, we're not sure who's going to win the revolution. There have been some victories on either side. It's uncertain. And the British look at the situation and say, there's Vermont. They've been asking now for 3 years to come into the Union, and the Congress always says no, not now, not during the war, not while New York is opposed, etc., etc. What if we brought them back into the British Empire, attached them to Canada, split them off from New England? If we do that, given the importance of the Champlain Valley as a military highway, we probably win the war against those darn colonials. So they send a spy to talk to the only Vermonter they've ever heard of, which of course is Ethan Allen. He's back by now from prison. And Ethan says, gosh, I don't want to be Benedict Arnold, who's just been exposed and almost captured, but this is an interesting idea. So he takes it to Chittenden, and a small group, maybe 8 or 10 Vermonters, are in on this, including Ira, Jonas Fay, Thomas Chittenden. And they start talking to the Brits. Now, if you read any biography of Ethan Allen, it will assure you Ethan was king, Ethan was in charge, nobody else mattered, nobody else had an opinion worth a darn. I don't happen to agree with that. I think that if I'm going to engage in treasonous espionage, I am not putting one of the heaviest drinkers, biggest talkers, braggarts, and loudmouths in Vermont in charge of putting my neck in a noose. And I think it definitely downgrades the influence and authority of Governor Chittenden. He was a powerful force. And I think he looked at the situation and said, I need a sneaky little guy that can be in a room and nobody knows he was there. I need Ira Allen as my principal negotiator. Ethan's advice, Ethan's participation is important, but you don't send Ethan Allen out in public to do that kind of work. They send Ira north to the northern end of Lake Champlain, and he negotiates with Haldeman's agents, Haldeman's go-betweens. And the question is, will Vermont give up the American Revolution and become a British province? And very early in this process, the British agents start writing back to Haldeman. We don't like this little guy. We don't trust this little guy. Getting a straight answer out of him is like nailing Jello to a wall. He's just, but the prize, if we win this, is so important, we should keep going. While it's happening, American observers are becoming quite concerned. All of a sudden, the British in Canada stop raiding the Vermont frontier. They start sending Vermont prisoners of war back just because they like us. And the question is, why are they our friends now when they were our hated enemies before? It's getting very tricky. If the Brits decide you're lying, they'll imprison you in Quebec City in their deepest, darkest hole. If the Americans, the American patriots, decide you are committing treason, they're going to hang you. So this requires a backbone. It's not a job you send Kevin Graffagnino out to accomplish for you, because I'd melt like a little puddle. And at one point, Ira has to satisfy both sides. Summer of 1781, the Vermont legislature calls him in open session with a public gallery. What have you been doing? Why are you up there with the British? And Ira gives one speech, knowing that Haldeman has sent 2 spies down from Canada. Gives one speech, and both sides go away thinking he's on their side. It's extraordinary. As Ira writes years later, is it not curious to see 2 opposing parties believing what they wish to believe and thereby deceiving themselves? It is. It's quite curious to me that one person could get away with this. Finally, in the late summer of 1781, Haldeman has had enough. He says, it's time, in the Vermont phrase, fish or cut bait, Allens. He sends an army south from Canada. They park at the south end of Lake Champlain, and they have a written proclamation welcoming Vermont back into the empire. If they release that, the Allens are in serious trouble, because I don't think there was ever a prayer that the majority of Vermont residents would have gone along. I think the majority of Vermont residents were loyal Americans. 2/3 of them were not on the Allens' side in this negotiation. So the Allens are in trouble. This is the fall of 1781, and then news comes from Virginia. Cornwallis has surrendered at Yorktown, and the war is over. That's it, militarily. There's no more possibility that the Brits are going to keep going at this war. So the Allens are saved. And from day one, Ira starts controlling the narrative. We were brave American patriots. We misled the British deliberately to keep them bottled up in Canada. We never would have considered going back to the British Empire. And that becomes the Vermont story for the next 150 years because of what Ira is able to accomplish. Now that story, while very comforting to all Vermonters I know, leaves out the fact, two things. The Allens continued the negotiations after the war is over. There's no military threat from Canada after the Treaty of Paris, but Levi, Ethan, and Ira keep assuring Haldimand that Vermont wants to rejoin the British Empire. We don't want statehood. We want to be part of what you guys have going in Canada. And the other thing that's inescapable, to the Allens and the Allens alone, a treaty, agreements, a close relationship financially and commercially with England is absolutely essential if you own most of the northwestern 2/3 of Vermont, because you move everything on water and the lake flows north to Canada. If the lake flowed to the Hudson River, you could float anything you wanted down to Albany and New York. But in the 1790s, your northwestern Vermont trade is going to be with Canada. So there's a big financial incentive to the Allens to have, if not a direct government relationship, then a non-American financial relationship with British Canada. So the war ends, and it's like a dam being let loose in terms of settlement. You can go north of Rutland, and the land in Vermont is cheap. It is very fertile, particularly in the Champlain Valley, and it hasn't been farmed over. You're a second, third son in Connecticut. You're heading north to Vermont. Settlement brings with it a variety of factors for Ira Allen. One, suddenly there are thousands of new Vermonters who don't share his goals. They're not interested in what he's interested in, and many of them are young men of ambition who don't want one person holding 6 or 7 statewide offices of power. So Ira very quickly finds he lacks Ethan's personal touch. Ethan was popular. Ira never in his life can look around and say, everybody in this room likes me, because it simply wouldn't have been so. So he has to start giving up those positions of power in the late 1780s. The one that really bothered him, I'm sure, was Surveyor General, because that was the one that a land speculator really wanted to be in charge of. So he moves north. He had spent the war in Sunderland, down in Bennington County. If you go down to Sunderland, his house is still standing. It's been enlarged substantially. It's an inn now. He moves to the Falls of the Winooski, in what is then the town of Colchester, today the city of Winooski. If you cross over from Burlington, down the hill, across the bridge, you're looking right at the Winooski block. Big eagle. Amazed that nobody's ever stolen that eagle. I think some antiques guy would have gone up there, taken it away years ago. That's where his house was. And he He builds forges, he builds mills. The falls of the Winooski are the center of what's going to be his empire. He gets married. He'd never been married. And then suddenly in 1789, he's 38. He marries my favorite Miss Enos. My favorite Miss Enos is Jerusha. She's 25 or thereabouts, so she's considerably younger. He helps create the University of Vermont. How many people here are UVM parents, staff, or graduates? Most of us. My family has 8 degrees from UVM, so I kind of bleed green and gold. Everybody knows in the summer of 1791 that the legislature will charter a state university that fall, because a new state needs some things that prove you're for real. State prison is usually high on everybody's list, and the university. Both are seen as economic drivers locally. They're going to bring money. They're going to give legitimacy to whatever town they land in. And the legislature makes it known that when they charter the university, the location will be settled on by which town bid the most. Which town will give the most land, the most building materials, and the most money. And in the summer, Bennington, Williamstown, Woodstock, Windsor, Rutland, a variety of other communities, some you would think likely, some you would think utterly improbable, put in their bids. And the top bid is 400 pounds, which is a lot of money in 1791. And Ira looks at that and says, I'll add a 0. I'll do 4,000, 10 times the highest bid, but it's going to be in Burlington, most of which Ira owns. So he's got some self-interest here. And the legislature, sure, that's great, Burlington. And Ira gives, all of you know the UVM green, that's Ira land. The Waterman, the William Science Hall, Royal Town, all of that is land that Ira donated. He says, that's 1,500 pounds. And the new trustees look around and say, great, when's the 2,500 in cash coming? And Ira says, soon, sort of the check is in the mail. The reality is by 1791, he doesn't have 2,500 pounds in cash. And he keeps thinking he'll get it because success is coming. Reality is he never pays the 2,500 out. I'm a UVM alum. I'm an occasional donor. I was a UVM fundraiser, etc. I think it's ironic as heck that the highest level of giving at UVM is the Ira Allen Society. Because I think if I go in tomorrow and pledge my $25 million, they'll give me the coffee mug and the socks and the tickets to the hockey game and all that stuff. Give me a little plaque. But if I don't pay the $25 million, eventually they're going to take my name off of everything. So those of you who are any Ira Allen Society members here, it's up there financially, believe me. So the reason he doesn't pay is he hasn't got any cash flow. He owns 200,000 acres of Chittenden, Franklin, and Grand Isle counties, but he isn't generating money from them, but he won't sell any of it. He wants to do it at his own pace. And he creates a plan with Brother Levi, older Brother Levi, who is a ne'er-do-well, a lifelong alcoholic, the sweetest guy you've ever met. And he just, if you can find a way to screw something up, Levi Allen probably invented it. He's a really likable, he's the most likable of the Allen brothers and the most romantic. He writes letters to his wife, Nancy, because he's away all the time on one scheme or another. The sun, the moon, the stars do not shine as bright when we're not together, dear Nancy. I almost cannot breathe without the oxygen you bring to a room. Ira Allen signs his letters to Jerusha, your friend Ira Allen. I mean, I can do better than that. They set Levi up at St. John's, British outpost on the Richelieu River. He's been a Tory, so the Brits like him. Ira at Burlington, Colchester is going to send on big rafts, water, big timber raft, timber, grain, potash, anything that the the agricultural frontier produces that other people might want. You're going to send them on the lake, on the Richelieu River north, which flows into the St. Lawrence, and then, let's see, this will be east by northeast to Quebec City, the largest city in North America, the commercial center. You're going to sell those products for a profit, and you're going to bring back into Vermont the manufactured goods that Europe creates that you don't have the factories for. You don't have any way to, but your frontier people want. Profit both ways. You're the richest man in northern New England. It's a great plan. But there are three things wrong with it. One, the Richelieu is an uncertain water highway. It has rapids or it has shoals. And in both cases, your rafts either aren't going to go over or are going to get busted up. And this is a real problem for continuity. Two, Vermont has joined the Union, so you don't have separate deals between Vermont and Quebec anymore. You have American regulations, you have British customs at the lake, viewing you as an American. And sometimes you get your raft to the north end of Lake Champlain, and the Brits let you through. Great. Sometimes you get your raft up there, and they let you through if you bribe them. Well, that's a bit more expensive. And sometimes just because, for the fun of it, they throw everything on the raft into the water. So it's hard to make a lot of money with your goods at the bottom of Lake Champlain. And third, and perhaps most important, you have floated your goods to Quebec City with the current. And you get there and the Quebec merchants rob you blind. They pay you 2 cents on the dollar for your goods, knowing you have no choice. You can't float back in the other direction. Ira's letters at UVM are full of denunciations of those stinkers at Quebec who are cheating me. So by 1795, Ira is drowning in red ink. He is on the verge of bankruptcy for all of his dreams and hopes and plans and his 200,000 acres. He has no money. Now, you or I, looking back, could say, why didn't you sell 100,000 acres? Contract the dream from richest man in New England to well-to-do family, and it would be manageable. Ira never thinks of that. He doesn't like to make his dreams small. It's big. It's got to be a big dream. And Ira has a plan. This is one of the things I love about Ira Allen. You or I might give up. No, Ira has a plan. December 1795, he goes to Boston. He mortgages, but does not sell, some of his best lands in the Champlain Valley. He puts the gold in the bottom of a false bottom of a trunk, and he sails to England. First time he's ever left North America, the first time he's really been much of anywhere. And he goes to London, and he looks for appointments with the Secretary of the Colonies and people of that stature to outline his plan for their benefit and, yes, for Ira's benefit. He wants to tell them we need to build a canal around the pesky parts of the Richelieu River to connect Burlington, seagoing ships from Burlington, Vermont, into the St. Lawrence River, bypassing Quebec City, because we're going to trade directly with England. And if this works, this is going to make Ira Allen financially. To his considerable chagrin, he finds out that he thinks he's a somebody. Governor Chittenden named him a major general in the state militia before he left. Give him some cachet. I'm General Ira Allen of Vermont. The Brits look at him and they say, you don't dress very well. We don't know who your grandfather was. You're not a lord or a duke. You're a nobody. You're a colonial wannabe. And in his term, they kept me dancing attendance in outer offices. In other words, he gets to sit in the waiting room until somebody will talk to him. And after weeks of this, they finally let him in to talk to some undersecretary or something. And they say, this is a really good idea. We may very well do this. But if we do, what in the world do we need you for? And this just enrages him. It would have disappointed me, and I would have snuck back home and seen what I could salvage. It just makes him angry, so he moves on to plan B. And that's the other great thing about IRA. If plan A doesn't reach your goal, you always have plan B in your back pocket, which is the exact opposite way of achieving the same thing. You can't deal with England in 1796. What do? You cross the English Channel, you go to Paris, and you negotiate with France. France has had its revolution. It has executed everything that resembles an aristocrat in the country, and they are ruled by the Directory, 3 men who are in charge of the French revolutionary government. IRA actually gets an audience with the high-level people in Paris, and he says, here's my plan. You give me guns, some startup capital, and a small French army next year. I will take the guns and the money to North America. This year, I will personally recruit 10,000 Green Mountain Boys, and we will invade Canada. We will overthrow the small peacetime garrisons that the British have in Canada. And most important for you guys, because you've been making a lot of noise about liberté, égalité, fraternité, exporting democratic revolutions to other parts of the world. And I know you're sincere. What about your French-Canadian brethren yearning to breathe free in Canada? The majority of the population in Canada is French, and they have the boot of British tyranny on their necks since the Brits took it away in 1764 after the French and Indian War. The Directory loves it. They think they really are sincere about exporting revolution. And they give him the guns. They give him paperwork that says he bought the guns, which is ridiculous. He didn't pay a nickel for the guns. They load them at Ostend Harbor on a lovely name for a gun runner, the Olive Branch. And the Olive Branch sails from Ostend across the North Atlantic to fame and fortune for Ira Allen, because the revolution that he wants to create, we're going to create a new nation in Canada, and they're going to call it United Columbia. And it's going to be a democratic republic. No more monarchy, no more aristocrats. Great idea. And when we do that, hey, maybe we should build a ship canal around those pesky parts of the Richelieu. And Burlington will trade directly with France. And yeah, Ira Allen will make some money, but I'm a Democrat, a real small d Democrat. And he says to them, gentlemen, we're sophisticates, we're worldly men. We don't need symbols or slogans, but the little people, they do. So here's a flag. Red, white, blue horizontal stripes, bottom stripe is green, presumably for Vermont. And the French tricolor in the United States. And the flag is still in the French archives. And it's made of silk. It's made a little bit bigger than this book. And great. So he's headed across the Atlantic. This time it's going to really work out. You got to figure the British had some kind of spy system in Paris, because they set out after him. They send the HMS Audacious out. They pick him up 3 weeks out. They haul him back. He gives them his paperwork. Look at that. I paid for it. Look at that. It's got a notary seal and everything. They don't believe it. They haul him back to Portsmouth. They unload the guns and put them as close to the sea as possible, so they'll rust out as quickly as possible. And they charge him at first with fomenting rebellion in Ireland, which is really in a state ready for rebellion in this mid-1790s. He says, guys, 3 weeks that direction. Wait, you think I'm going to Ireland the long way? And they said, well, no, I guess not. We think you're headed to Canada, which is exactly what he was doing. He said, no, I got paperwork. They put him in the court system. Anybody here read Bleak House in high school or college? English majors? Yeah. Jarndyce versus Jarndyce, the longest running court case in British legal history, according to Dickens. I think he just looked at what happened to Ira and adapted it, because the Brits keep him going for a year and a half. Your commas are in the wrong place. They give him a judge who hates Americans and says so every morning to start the proceedings. And finally, a year and a half, they say, if you just had better paperwork from France, we might believe you. And he makes the worst decision of his life. He goes back across the channel. He goes to Paris, and he figures, well, the directory helped me before. They'll help me again. Yeah, except all those guys are dead because fortune's wheel tends to turn quickly in revolutionary France, and your pals are either exiled or they've been executed. The new directory looks at him and says, funny looking little guy comes straight from England, doesn't speak a word of French, British spy. And they throw him in prison. They don't tell him why, they don't charge him with anything. And habeas corpus is a little shaky in revolutionary France. And they just leave him there. And in France in those days, in many countries, if you don't pay for your food, you don't get any food. So he lives on handouts from Americans who are in Paris for diplomacy or commerce. A year later, they throw him out of prison. And they don't tell him why. Just kind of, I guess we need the cell, get out. Takes him a year because his health has declined dramatically in prison, as yours or mine might very well as well. Takes him a year to be healthy enough to cross the Atlantic to America and to get permission from them. The French don't want him in prison, but they're not sure they want him to leave. He gets back, he lands at Philadelphia in January of 1801. He's been gone for 5 years. He told Jerusha, I'll be gone 7 or 8 months. He comes back to the Champlain Valley in the spring of 1801, and it is all gone. Everything is in ruins. The courts have taken away his land. Other speculators have seized what he thought was his. He hadn't been able to pay the taxes. It's a ruin. And he's being dunned for imprisonment for debt. Because in those days, if you have a powerful creditor, he finds a friendly judge. He throws you in jail. You don't get out of jail till you pay your debt, which you can't do while you're in jail. It's a nasty circle. Ira gets the legislature to grant him immunity from imprisonment for debt for 1 year. Struggles, fights, tries every trick he can. Doesn't work. He asks for another year, and the legislature says, forget it. You're toast. Just accept it, move on. Ira calls his creditors. Most of them are Burlingtonians. And he says, party at my house, I'll cross the river. I will satisfy all your claims this evening. They come, they eat and they drink in his front parlor. Ira slips out the back door, gets on a small sloop, heads down the river to the lake, and instead of going to Canada, he turns south. And he goes all the way to Kentucky. And the reason he goes to Kentucky is there's a loophole in the federal bankruptcy law, which says if one person of standing will swear to a judge that nobody has a claim of $50 against you, you're immune from imprisonment for debt. Well, Matthew Lyon lives in Kentucky, Ira's friend, founder of the town of Fairhaven, revolutionary hero, jailed in Vermont alien sedition laws in the 1790s, about to be elected congressman in Kentucky. So he's a person of stature. He goes to the judge and says, oh, no, Ira doesn't owe anybody money. Now, this is pure perjury. I mean, Matthew Lyon knew full well there were 500 people in Vermont with claims of more than $50. But the judge says, well, great, I believe what my friend Matthew Lyon. So he grants him immunity. Well, that's great, except here in Vermont. If he comes back, some creditor will find a friendly judge who will throw him in prison. And he's well aware that Levi, his last surviving brother, has died in debtor's prison in Burlington. If you want Levi Allen's grave, you have to dig up the old YMCA building, because that's approximately where the jail was. When you die a debtor, if I take your body to bury it, I assume your debts. So the family just leaves him there, and he's buried in the jail yard. So Ira's not coming back. He sneaks in once with 2 pistols and gets out as soon as he can. Goes to Philadelphia. He spends the last decade of his life there. He is sick. His health is declining. He has almost no money. He publishes constantly books, pamphlets, tirades. The whole point of all of it, somebody owes me. I got rooked in the olive branch deal. France owes me, England owes me, the United States owes me, anybody I ever met owes me. It's increasingly disjointed, increasingly irrational, and it's a man in serious decline. And then in the last 6 months of his life, Ira is reborn. 3 Spanish-American mercenaries come to stay at his seedy boarding house in Philadelphia, and they're in Philadelphia to raise money for a revolution in northern Mexico, what today is Texas. This is 1813, and Ira is reborn. He says, boys, do I know revolution? I led the revolution in Vermont, and look, we got our own state out of it. I had a great revolution planned in Canada till those stinky Brits captured all my guns. You guys, raise your money, go south, recruit your army. I'll give you the best advice you've ever gotten. Take a printer and a printing press, because you will persuade more people with the power of the pen than you will with guns. And when you get your new country going, I'm going to be your ambassador to the United States of America. So he's got hope. Things are going to work out. Well, the Gutierrez de Lara expedition goes south. It fails miserably. We're 20, 23 years shy of Davy Crockett and the Alamo. It's way too soon. It fails miserably. I think it's good that Ira dies before he hears. Before word comes from Mexico, Ira passes away in mid-January 1814. He's 62. The physician says retrocedent gout. I think it would have been just as accurate to say he wore out. That the Paris prison, being old for his generation, he is bankrupt. The Quakers have to come and pick up his body and plant it in the Free Quaker Cemetery. And I've looked for 40 years back here in Vermont. One obituary, one mention of his passing. The Burlington Weekly, the Northern Sentinel, died in Philadelphia, General Ira Allen, late of Colchester. 3 lines for a guy who had been one of the most powerful and one of the richest people in the state of Vermont. But he'd been gone for the better part of 20 years. And in Vermont by 1814, he was, oh yeah, Ethan's little brother, right? Shady guy, sneaky guy. He was in the shadows of history already, and he has stayed there. We have tended not to pay as much attention, and that is really too bad, because the non-military accomplishments of early Vermonters, the Isaac Tickners, the Thomas Chittendens, the Ira Allen, Jacob Bailey of Newbury, are just as important as riding around beating up the Yorkers, etc., or taking Fort Ty, which this room could have taken Fort Ty. There were virtually no garrison. Any Boy Scouts could have taken Fort Ty in 1775. Ira is the Vermont epitome of an important American frontier type. The dreamer, the guy who looks, you or I, where's the boundary of my farm? Can I chop down enough trees to build a cabin? Can I get in a crop so we don't starve this winter? That's our vision. Ira looks at Burlington. When he gets to the university, Burlington has 350 people, and he sees a city on a hill. He sees a university. He sees a lake teeming with commerce. None of this is apparent to his contemporaries. So that dreamer is really important on the American frontier from Maine to California. The sad fact is most of them go bankrupt. Their dreams are beyond their reach, beyond their grasp. And it's the next generation. In Burlington, Gideon King, King Street, Admiral of Lake Champlain. He's a generation younger. The Catlin brothers, whose mansion was up where the Mary Fletcher Hospital was built on the hill. They take over the mills. They're married to Ira's nieces, so they sue him and take his land away. Those are the folks who make it happen. It's all going to become true, but Ira isn't here for it. So get him in the picture. And I'll give you three things that are possibilities. One, I think you'll have a good time because he's an interesting guy. And studying Ira, you may laugh, you may growl, whatever, but he is an interesting man if you like history. Well, that's one. Two, he is involved in everything but religion. And somebody in this room is going to want to ask me, why is there an Ira Allen Chapel at UVM named after a guy who, as far as we can tell, never went in a church in his life and never belonged to a religious denomination? But other than religion, politics, commerce, settlement, whatever else, Ira is illuminating. You're going to learn a lot more about Vermont the more you know about Ira. And three, I don't care whether Ira's watching you from up there or down there. He'll enjoy the attention. Thank you. So, questions? Let me finish here. I'm not quite done. Rebuttal. Short speeches disguised as questions so you can show us all how much you know. Just quiet down back there, mister. There is an Ira Allen Chapel because in the 19-teens, a rich Westerner retires to Manchester, Vermont. Anybody here ever been to the Wilburton Inn in Manchester? Yeah, about the size of the Waterman Building at UVM. It was the residence of James B. Wilbur. He comes to Vermont. He is rich beyond belief, and he decides that he wants to do two things. He wants to collect early Vermont history. He becomes a bibliophile, books, papers, cool stuff. And he takes up Ira Allen as his cause. Ira has been neglected. Ira was a saint. Ira was perfect. And he writes a fat 2-volume biography of Ira. I would like to say that I believe this one to be more readable than Mr. Wilbur's work. Guy Bailey is president of UVM at this point, and Bailey had many, many skills. He keeps UVM alive during the Depression. He's a great fundraiser, and he looks at James Wilbur and says, aha, a donor, a prospect. And he starts writing him letters. Mr. Wilbur, you're so smart. Mr. Wilbur, you're so wonderful. How'd you like to be on the board? Oh, that's great. How'd you like to put up a statue of Ira Allen? All of us UVMers know the statue. How'd you like to tell us what should be on the plaque? Well, most of us didn't read the plaque as students. We just saw the guy on the pedestal. It says, founder, I'm not sure the order, but here are the two things it says. Founder of the state of Vermont. Founder of this university. Neither is accurate. Important leader, absolutely, but not the founder of either institution. But that's what Mr. Wilbur wanted. Next step for Guy Bailey. Mr. Wilbur, we really need a chapel. I mean, a New England university that has a green should have a chapel. Would you build one for us? Would you name it for us, please, sir? That's why Ira Allen Chapel is at the University of Vermont. And that's why the Fleming Museum got built. Because the third step, we've run out of money for Fleming Museum. Mr. Wilbur built the back half, what was the back half, not the Colchester Avenue part. And if you go in from the campus side, and very few of us ever looked up, each wall has the name of an early Vermont leader. Thomas Chittenden, Ethan Allen, Ira Allen, Stephen Rowe Bradley, because that's where Mr. Wilbur put his collection when he died. He dies, he leaves the collection, and he leaves $3 million in cash to the university, which today would be $90 million, the biggest gift the university has ever received by far. But he leaves it with a condition. He says, This is 1930. Vermont's population has not grown in a century. The nation's population quintupled. Ours stayed the same. And Wilbur says, I don't ever want to see arts and sciences any bigger than X. Sets a numerical limit. Well, that's fine, except the fact that now Vermont population has well more than doubled in the succeeding century. So by the 1950s, the university is throwing chemistry, that's not really a science, or English, that's not really an art, out of arts and science. Put them in College of Agriculture or something like that. And finally, they get fed up and say, we got to stop this. I mean, Wilbur's been dead for 25 years. How do we get around this? Because the Wilbur family is still there. And the will says we get our money back if you guys violate this. So they go to Warren Robinson Austin, St. Albans boy, U.S. Senator, first American ambassador to the United Nations, and a UVMer. And he says, I know a judge. And they go to the judge, and the judge says, Mr. Wilbur would have understood. Go ahead. You don't have to pay any attention to this. The family immediately sues, and Miss Senator Austin finds us another judge. So that one fails. But I knew people when I was young who knew James Wilbur. When they were in their 20s, he was in his 80s. And they said, there is no doubt that that man never would have understood anything except what he thought he knew. And he knew everything. So thank God for Warren Robinson Austin, because a lot of people have gone to UVM on Wilbur scholarships. That money really helps save our alma mater. So somebody here wants to know, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you said Ira Allen is a founding father who is hard to love.
Yep.
And many people would argue all of the founding fathers are hard to love. Particularly because of discriminatory policies and beliefs prolific in their era.
Sure.
So can you speak to what was Ira Allen's relationship to Indigenous people and Black people in America?
I've never seen any evidence of any kind about Ira's relationship to African Americans. He did not have the kind of potential servant relationship that Ethan may have had here at the Homestead. I do know that I believe sincerely that Ira believed in democracy. He believed in equality. He was not an aristocrat. He was not a guy who needed a big fancy carriage or a giant mansion. He believed that, the tenets of the Declaration of Independence, he was all in support of. He has a very bad reputation among Vermont indigenous peoples because their central village in northwestern Vermont was and remains the town of Swanton. The Missisquoi River in Swanton is prime mill site. And the French had built sawmills there, and they had cleared the land. And Ira really wanted Swanton as part of his commercial and real estate empire. He's all in favor of the Caucasian legal strategy, which is to say that the Abenaki in Vermont gave up their land rights by joining the British in the Revolution. And the Vermont courts agree with that, and it's a strategy that you can track across this country. If it's a white court, they're going to find a reason that the Native Americans have no rights or that treaties can be broken, etc. So Ira benefits from this, but I think it is unfair to say that he invents the strategy or that he is a horrible, evil human being for agreeing with it. There was this goes back 35 years, a big protest at UVM, I think about 1990, 91, about you don't have enough diversity. They took over the admin wing at the university, and George Davis got fired as president for going on a little ladder up into his own office. It brought in Tom Salmon. And Tom's first comment was, I ain't climbing any ladders. You guys protest, we'll bring the police in. And they did. But part of that protest was against Ira. They wanted the statue removed. and they put out a communique for the press that said that murdering dog Ira Ellen, which led to my question about their spelling abilities. I thought for a while I was going to take the statue and put it in my living room down in Shelburne. And hasn't happened, didn't happen, but who knows? I mean, we're in an age where any fault can get you removed from the Mead Chapel at Middlebury College. The Dorothy Canfield Fisher Award has been renamed. If you have a fault that the 21st century doesn't agree with, then there can be cries to erase you as someone to be respected. And my argument is, put it into context. And on balance, did Ira do more good than harm? And I believe he did. I believe Ethan Allen did much more good than harm. But, you know, who in 2025 could look back at 1810 and find anybody who lives up to every single social and philosophical tenet that we hold to today? It's impossible. Nobody can meet those standards any more than we will be able to 2 centuries from now. Yes, ma'am. I've not seen much at all about that relationship. I think that Fanny is, of course, the beautiful young second wife of Ethan. Ira is gone he's gone from basically 1795 to 1814. We have letters of Ira's written back to his family, mostly to Jerusha, saying, come to Philadelphia. I've got a French priest who will tutor the children, and then there's this private school, and there's no evidence that Jerusha even answers him. She certainly never goes to Philadelphia. And my guess is she said, look, you went away, you had this silly dream, I learned to live without you. It's comfortable here in Vermont where my friends and my family are. I'm not going to Philadelphia, but I've never seen anything about Fanny and Ira interacting much at all. So my answer is I don't know. Yes, ma'am. They did. They built the Chambly Canal in the 19th century. Canals are a great idea, but you don't have the technology to make them viable till the 1820s, really. They built a little one at Bellows Falls in the early first canal in the United States. But the Erie Canal, the Champlain Canal, which would have made possible Burlington trade with Albany and New York, is also 1820s, and which is also the growth and early days of steamboats. You can go against the current if you've got a steamboat, but it's dreamers sometimes are not practical. And, yes, exactly. They're visionaries, and I like that about art. I wrote in the preface to this book, I said, you know, when I was a grad student of Nick Muller's, I wrote my thesis on Zadok Thompson, the Vermont historian. And at my orals, my defense, somebody asked me, do you like him? And I said, yeah, I do, because I have read about him. They closed all the stores in downtown Burlington for Zadok Thompson's funeral because people loved him. He was gentle, he was kind, he was admired, he was liked, and I like him. I'm not so sure I like Ira Allen. I wouldn't trust Ira Allen, particularly in his last 2 or 3 decades. Desperation led him into financial strategies and activities that make him undependable even to his closest relatives. But boy, Ira in his 20s and 30s, in my eyes, is an admirable young man. He puts his life on the line, he puts his career on the line, and he is one of the half dozen most important 18th century Vermonters, in my opinion. And then it goes sideways and downhill, and as it does for him. He's human, in other words, and on balance, I think he did more good things than bad things. Most of the bad things he tried to do, he failed at doing. So Does he get points for failure? I doubt it. Anybody want to know what happened to Jerusha and the kids? Yeah, of course you do. You're just too shy to say so. Jerusha remembers 15 years younger. Ira dies in 1814, and it's all bankrupt. There's nothing left. Here, Philadelphia. But when they married in 1789, Ira's wedding present to Jerusha is the town of Irisburg, over in the Northeast Kingdom, south of Newport. 35,000 acres of nothing, of wilderness. And I'm sure Jerusha looked at this and said, what? What about a Mercedes? What about a Cuisinart or something? Jeez Louise, what a diamond necklace. But it's hers. And she pays the taxes when he's off gallivanting, and her nephew Heman helps her. When Ira dies, she owns Irisburg, and she moves to Irisburg. They had 3 children. One dies, Zimri dies at Middlebury College. He's about 20, he's studying medicine. Maria Juliet dies at St. Alban. She's about 15. It's a girls' boarding school. And Ira Hayden Allen is alive. He's 25 years old in 1814-15. He and his mom moved to Irisburg. They set apart land for a town green. If you go to Irisburg, that was set up by Jerusha Allen. They build mills, they lease land. And by the time of the Civil War, it takes 45 years, Jerusha has died. Ira Hayden Allen is the richest man in Orleans County by the time of the Civil War. Now, he has no adventure ever in his life. He never takes a chance. He never does anything bold, but penny by penny, he builds a fortune that eluded his father and eluded his uncles. There's a letter in the Stevens family papers. Henry Stevens was first president of the Vermont Historical Society, 1830s. He helps create the Vermont. And by the 1850s, Stevens finds out that one of Ethan's sons is living in poverty in Michigan. And he says, son of the hero of Ticonderoga, let's bring him home. Let's let him die here in the Green Mountains where he grew up. And he turns to Ira Hayden Allen as one of the richest people in the world. You know, we just want to buy him a little farm. How'd you like to help? And Ira Hayden Allen stiffs him. He says, well, yeah, I knew him. We played together as kids. We were boyhood pals. But I don't owe him anything. Get your money from somebody else. Really made me dislike Ira Hayden Allen because he could have funded it out of the change from the cushions of the couch. So Ethan's son dies in poverty in Michigan. And I thought, what a stinker. You know, a little generosity, a little human empathy. What else? Yes, sir.
You made no secret of the fact how cash-strapped he was really his entire life. Right? And was that not the case throughout North America and the colonies in general? And what caused, I mean, when you read about the Revolution in general, there's never any cash. Nobody's ever got any cash. True. Did Britain just shut it off, just stop the whole cash?
The colonies and the states, colonies, states, local banks all issued money. Farmers tend not to have a lot of cash. They're paying their debts in the grain and the other crops that they raise. So it's a barter economy as much as it is a cash economy. And you're paying your taxes. Your local land taxes quite often are payable in goods rather than in hard money. But yeah, it's any frontier. You're going to barter your way through much of your finances.
So kind of cash itself, money, wasn't really needed so much, I guess.
Not as much, but everybody who didn't have it would have liked to have more. There's no question about that.
It's universal and forever.
Yes, exactly. And there were so many variations. There's actually a good little book put out 40 years ago. How much is that in real money? Trying to help early American historians navigate what's the difference between a dollar in Vermont versus a pound sterling. Pound sterling was the gold standard, but a New Hampshire pound was not a pound sterling. So you had a very shaky system, and it doesn't get a whole lot better until the middle decades of the 19th century. The local banks, and there are several dozen in Vermont that issue currency. And some of them are real banks and some of them are not. And some of the banknotes are counterfeited and some are not. It's tremendously tricky trying to figure out what money is money in those days. A gold coin you can figure out. Yes.
We have time for one more question, and then if anyone has questions, can they come
Of
up
course.
to you after?
Yes. $10 a pop. Yes.
I'm curious, a double question, literacy, what kind of literacy there was in Vermont in the 1780s? And what was Ira's background education? Was he just home?
It's a real good question, and lots of people have asked that, because in his lifetime, Ira published more than 1,500 pages of books, pamphlets. Where the hell did he learn how to write? And it's a great question, because I've never found any evidence that he made it past what you or I might consider the middle years of high school. I mean, Ethan trains to go to Yale, but doesn't because his dad dies, which was probably good because Ethan, as a congregational minister, this does not compute for me. Both Allens become prolific pamphlet writers, and they pick up the rhetoric of revolution, what the Adamses and the Jeffersons are doing on the seaboard, and they adapt it beautifully. Yeoman farmers yearning to breathe free, fighting against the aristocratic landlords of the New York system. And as soon as the revolution starts, yeoman American farmers yearning to breathe free, fighting against the Tories from England. It's wonderful stuff, but we don't have answers. Where did they get the aptitude? They're sons of lower middle class farmers. There's no evidence of where they learned to do it. They are among the greatest examples of the power of the pioneer press, the press away from Boston, away from Philadelphia. You can chart this from North Carolina to Maine. Those rebellious backwoods groups often turn to the printing press. And there's a great book waiting to be written that the seaboard has all been covered by Bernard Balin decades ago, but nobody has done the backwoods. And
Well, how literate was this conference here? I kind of thought there were a lot of X's,
Yep.
mark my signature
Yeah.
kind of thing.
New England was substantially more literate than the South, certainly, which has been true forever. I'm sorry.
Towns were set up, or was it education, one of the, I mean, I've read Milton, Vermont, the original books, and one of the very first things they were doing was having a committee that was going to set up.
They set aside a lot for the first settled schoolmaster. It's a New England ethos. It's a town-based rather than, one of the reasons we hate Yorkers in those days, New York has a county-based system of government, still does. We have a town base. We have town meeting. We're good little D Democrats. But also, schools were much more important. But if you ask me what percent of Vermonters could have read an Ethan Allen pamphlet in the 1770s, I'd have guessed maybe a third. And they would have had the pamphlet read to them. Now, maybe 2/3 could sign their name. And there are a lot of X's on contracts from people who couldn't read or write. And it takes a while. You build your society by getting your mills on the rivers, and you put up a church or a meeting house, and you put up schools, and you become the New England village. But in 1770s, Bennington is a New England village, maybe Windsor. Most of it is hard scrabble. We're trying to make a living here, and itinerant preachers come and preach in a barn. They don't have a meeting house yet. Almost all of those are post 1800 in the Vermont townships. Burlington, as I said, 350 people for the first census in 1791. It's tiny, but Ira sees a city. He knows it will happen. It's going to become true. So,
And here we are today.
yes. So we have a sale. Angie tells me this is probably the most literate group in the state of Vermont. That you all love books. You can buy one of these at Phoenix for $25.95 plus tax. I will sell you one today for $20. I pay $15 for them. So I am a master businessman in the Ira Allen mode. I make $5 every time I sell it. So
Kevin, thank you
thank
so
you, folks.
much.